In this video, in our series on how to play Reality's Edge, we are going to discuss close combat. In the game, close combat and melee are the same things, so when you see those terms in the rulebook, you can use them interchangeably. To make a close combat attack, you activate your model and you choose from two actions, close combat attack and charge. Both cost only one activation point. They are essentially the same action, but with the charge, you get a free move action before you make a close combat attack. The rulebook has no stated limit on how many close combat attacks a model can make during a turn, like there is with ranged shooting. So there is a chance that you could roll a critical on your activation and make 3 close combat attacks against a model. We should note that unlike in ranged attacks, damage or wounds from close combat attacks are resolved immediately, so there is no waiting. Charging does have some limitations. You are limited to 1 charge a turn, and you can only charge models that your model has line of sight on.
So, since charge is a move action, in addition to a close combat action, you can run into a situation where you might want to move to a point where it could charge a model. So for an example, this individual can't see the model behind, so it might want to make a move action here, and then it can initiate a charge action. But remember, as a second move action, the charge's move distance will drop to the 6-sided die roll we discussed in the movement video. Of course, you might end up charging a model in Overwatch, but we'll discuss that in the Overwatch video.
When making the attack has to be in range. Now, being in range does not mean base to base. Looking at the current list of melee weapons in the base rulebook, there are 3 that push the melee range to 1 inch. The models will then make an opposed stat test using their melee stats. So both sides will roll their d10s and add their melee stats to the roll. And as always, high roll wins and ties go to their defenders. Now, you might wonder, what if the attacker's melee weapons are range 1 and that's where he makes the attack from, but the defender is not so similarly equipped? He might only have a little Bowie knife. Does that mean that the defender still gets to roll? Yes, the defender still gets to defend. The wording in the rulebook means the attacker is put under a range requirement, not the defender. So now let us look at the modifiers that come into play during close combat. So you can concentrate before you make a charge and a regular close combat attack. For both, you just execute the concentrate action and then initiate the attack. You can't concentrate more than once, so no rolling a critical, getting 3 action points, and then going concentrate, concentrate, attack.
Now, looking at the ranged combat modifiers from the previous video, you can see that there is an advantage from going prone and sniping at someone because of the penalty they'll suffer when shooting back. But if you stay prone, you can run into a problem where someone can run up to you and just stomp on you. Now, you'll notice on the close combat modifier chart, there's something about number of enemies in base contact. So let's say this person charges in. He'll suffer a penalty because there's now 2 people as base contact. Even though this one's still prone, it still counts as base contact. Because remember, when you're thinking of prone, you're actually thinking of the model standing up and just being the height of the base. So the base would actually be there. And when you're considering cover, remember, the cover modifier not only applies to a penalty for the attacker and the defender, but also the defender back. They're both in cover from each other, so they'll both suffer that negative modifier. Alright, so let's look at the situation where this model is attacking this model. If the attacker wins the roll, they're allowed to push the defending model back 1 inch anywhere along their back 180 arc. So you can go 1 inch this way, around there. Now, if the defender beats the attacker, they also get to push them back 1 inch anywhere along their back 180. Now, in this situation, they both stay locked in base-to-base contact. You cannot push them back and then get out or disengage. We'll discuss disengagements later. Now, if the attacker makes the successful attack and fails to take this model out of action, or they go out to 0 hit points and go catatonic, they can also throw in the 1 inch backward move. Now, the advantage of this is you might have a cliff behind this if you're on top of a building, and you can knock the model off and they'll also take falling damage. So, and let's cover the situation of what if you do a melee attack against a model behind linear cover. So, you can just move the model back and you get to scurry over the corner cover. Now you can also have the situation of where you attacked a model higher up. Let's say of course, if you have like the 1 inch range, you attack the higher up model, you get to scurry up the 1 inch and push them back, which might also lead them to falling.
So once you've successfully hit a target, it's now time to wound it. Wounds are an opposed test of the attacker's strength and the defender's defense stat. If the attacker gets a higher roll with the modifiers and the defender gets a lower roll, the damage is the same as in ranged combat, with the strength divided by 2 and rounded up. Now in close combat, there is no grazing as there is in ranged combat.
Now let's discuss disengaging from combat. Let's say these models have been engaging in close combat attacks, and this model would like to exit from close combat attack. It must make either an agility or a strength test. That's up for the controlling player to decide. So it's an unopposed test, roll 11 or higher to pass the target number of 10. If the roll fails, you lost the activation point you used to make that. If the roll succeeds, the model may move. So you roll the agility and you make a move. That would be 1 activation point. If the roll fails, you can try again on the second round to make the test again. So standard round would be you got 2 activation points, you got 2 chances to disengage. Of course, you could also disengage and shoot them in the face, or disengage and charge. There's a lot you can play around with this. Now, a model attempting to disengage when engaged with multiple models will only have to make 1 disengagement test using either the strength or the agility, but it will receive a -1 penalty for each enemy model attached. So in this case, it'd be an agility or strength test -1 because of the extra model. In this case, it'd be a strength or agility test at a -2 because of the additional 2 models after the first.
Thank you for watching this episode on Close Combat in Reality's Edge. Please join us for our next episode where we'll be talking about shooting into and out of close combat.
In this video on how to play Reality's Edge, let's discuss shooting into and out of close combat. So you should not bring your preconceptions of Kill Team or Necromunda into this game. There is no rule in the book stating that if your model is within base-to-base contact with an enemy model, has been attacked in close combat, or been charged, that they are limited in any action that they can take. Now, if you are in base-to-base contact with a model, you will have to disengage to make a move action. But why would you? Nothing says you can't shoot somebody while in base-to-base contact, and nothing says that you can only shoot someone you are in base-to-base combat with. So we discussed before in the range combat, there's no rule stating that she has to make a close combat action against him. She could actually make a ranged attack, and she would actually benefit from the point blank modifier. Now, she could also shoot him. However, there might be a line of sight obstruction between these models. However, she would not suffer that for shooting this model. Now, there are rules specific to shooting into models that are fighting with each other. For example, if this model wants to shoot her. These are on page 40 of the rulebook. Basically, you are just shooting at everyone in the group and hoping for the best. The model makes an aim test, you roll your d10, and if there's a hit, you just have to find an even way to distribute the probability to allocate the hit. So in this case, if this model hits its target number with its modifiers of 11, on its aim test, it has a 50-50 chance. So you could either roll a d10 and say 1 through 5 will hit this model, and 6 through 10 will hit this model, or you can just flip a coin. However, if there's a situation of where there are 3 models in the scrum or more, you can take your d10 and just assign everyone 3 slots. So 1, 2, 3 would be her, 4, 5, 6 would be him, and 7, 8, 9 would be him, with 10 being an automatic reroll. Now, if he has an automatic weapon and decides to pump 2 to 3 rounds in here, you'd basically have to repeat that process to allocate hits. But remember, damage will not be resolved until the end of the next turn, until the initiative trade's over. So, thank you for this special episode. I know there's no specific rules about shooting out of combat, but it's something you can read into it. But there are rules for shooting into combat. So in the next episode, we are going to come and talk about hiding and spotting.